What's different about living this way that I'm living now versus before? My days are way longer.
Yes.
My time is way slower.
Yeah.
I'm not in that routine washing machine to where time speeds by and 20 years go by. I don't know what next week, I don't even know what a couple days from now really looks like.
Hello and welcome, fellow human. My name is Zachary Stockill, and you are listening to Humans in Love, a podcast that looks at culture, relationships, and personal development from unconventional perspectives. Join me as I dig into the question of how people like you and I might get more out of life and love. Thanks for being here. Greetings from Canada, fellow human. I am back on Canadian soil for the first time in about a year and a half, and shocking, it's really friggin' cold. You'd think by May things would be improving, but it's not. So we are definitely not in Thailand anymore, but I'm happy to be back, and I'm happy this week to be sharing part 2 of my conversation with Mr. Sam Lawrence. Sam is a friend of mine. He's a tech entrepreneur. He is a consultant, does a whole lot of interesting work, but as usual today, we don't talk about any of that serious career kind of stuff. We actually focus in this discussion a lot on parenting, which we haven't talked a lot about in this podcast, but is a topic that I'm increasingly interested in as my friends start having kids and as I start thinking more seriously about entering that period of my life. So I really enjoyed today's conversation talking about parenting. We also talk a lot about long distance relationships, which again, I found really actually very useful, very inspiring. Sam talks a lot about a process called unschooling, which I was very curious to learn more about, very intriguing new way of educating young people. I think you'll get a lot out of this conversation. Of course, it'll make a lot more sense if you listen to this part 2 of this conversation after you listen to part 1. So if you want to hear the first half of this conversation, go back and listen to episode 25 first. Before we get into it, I'll remind you that ratings and reviews are really super important for any podcast to get off the ground, including this one. So if you dig Humans in Love, please let others know about it, share the episode with a friend or two, and even more important than that, please leave a rating and review on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Without any further ado, a very chilly Zachary Stockill bringing you my conversation with Mr. Sam Lawrence. Let's start with those questions. Those were good questions. You're doing my work for me. So what did you say? What did you leave behind? Why did you leave it behind? What are you looking for?
Yeah.
Because you were mentioning earlier, actually, I was going to come back to this anyway, that it seems like you had some clarity about what you want your life to be like.
Yeah.
And that must be really nice. So like what does Sam Lawrence want in 2019?
In 2019, I want to be in a neutral zone, which means I don't have a home. My home is, I'm going to keep switching locations. I've already been to, since January, it's now May, beginning of May, 7 or 8 different countries. This year, in this whole year, I plan to move around as much as I possibly can. That's more frequent when it's just me than when I'm in tow with April and Gray, because it's too hard. But I want to basically just go and watch what's happening in as many places as I can. And part of it is also in search for like, where might I have a part-time place to be. So that's one thing that I'm really looking for. I've already learned that some important lessons, which are that unlike the first time I traveled around when I was in my 20s, the speed of information has changed. And so people are using that conformity mechanism people use across borders now in ways that I didn't see the first time I traveled around. So when you now go into these other countries, the malls, the food, the music, the Instagram effect, all of that stuff is everywhere you go. I mean, it's basically the same. So sitting here in Chiang Mai, I mean, it's like a version of Austin, Texas, or Portland, Oregon. People speak a different language. You know, there may be some slight differences in some architecture.
But everyone's still Instagramming their brunch.
They're Instagramming their brunch. I would name an artist on that music wise, but it would seriously date me, so I'm not going to. But the same music you hear in that I heard in the States is pumped through the establishment now. You know, everyone's using apps to get their stuff done. Everybody, you know, like it doesn't feel materially different, unless some of the places I've been, Bali feels different, Luang Prabang and Laos feels a little bit different. Some of those places that haven't adopted those systemic solutions and aren't watching each other constantly on in a networked way, to where consensus builds in terms of how you're supposed to build towns and cultures and behaviors and all that stuff. So that part's a little shocking to me, just how homogeneous the world is becoming, is a little frightening, truly frightening to me, as someone who doesn't like to feel like they're participating in that. So so I mean, on the other hand, the value systems, I think, still can be pretty different in different places, and so it's great to be in, like, you know, the helpfulness that you get in Southeast Asia, the focus on kids, and you know, people stopping and kind of being kind to you, I would say happens in the United States, but you have to kind of get out of major metropolitan areas where the density, the stress density is way farther down on the scale, and then maybe you kind of run into a little bit of that. But that said, you also run into people going scared of people from the outside, whereas a lot of the places here are, you know, pretty welcoming of that overall. There's a line still, like in Bali, they'll let you get really far in, but at some point, if you're not Balinese, you don't get to kind of cross the line.
Thailand's similar. Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say the line is maybe a little further out in the United States, and some of the smaller, we have a small town home, so I'm speaking from experience, where it's like, you know, you're not from here, comes out a little bit more loudly than I'd say in Southeast Asia. So there's there's still differences, but on the other hand, I've also learned that not owning things and not being stationary, for me, I get a tremendous joy out of that. Traveling light. I mean, I came over here, I read everything on Reddit I could about, like, you know, how to pack for being an expat for a year or longer. And no matter what I read, I didn't follow it. You know, I thought I was following it. And then I brought way too much stuff over. And now you just realize, like, healthcare, which is way cheaper and as good or better, material possessions that you have, you don't need, the, you know, connectivity, all that stuff is everywhere. Like there's you know, this whole kind of mythology around you're not going to be able to find it, or you're not going to be able to do it, or it's not going to be as good, is a trapping that's absolutely a myth. And so you get these places. I mean, we've had to go to the emergency room multiple times, because not for huge emergencies, but like for, you know, kids falling and this and that and all that, people getting sick, and, you know, the care is like under $100, and it's done in a super clean place by someone who's extremely good at what they do. And like, it's ridiculous if people tell themselves a story that, like, we have the best thing and other people don't. I mean, this is a huge world filled with people who need healthcare. So yeah, I mean, that whole part of it, not owning things and just making choices that's back to not participating in big systems, big pharma, big, you know, bank credit, debt, owning huge houses, owning lots of shit, going into a job for somebody else and filling out your TPS report or whatever constantly, is not the life you have to do. You know,
I've probably talked about this in the podcast before, but I remember, like, I've spent the majority of my adult life living outside of Canada, in South America and mostly Asia. I remember one of the first times I came home after I'd started a business, and, you know, I was doing okay, not great, but okay. And I went back and I, you know, saw some old high school friends and that, and they had, brand new trucks and a nice house and all this stuff. And I was kind of getting down on myself thinking, well, I don't have these things. But then I remembered like, oh, wait a minute. They don't own any of this. It's all debt.
Right.
Everyone is swimming in debt. And then I had this moment, like just walking around this, middle-class Canadian neighborhood, looking around at all the shit that people had, like vehicles in their driveway and all these, fancy pools and all this. But it's like, no one owns anything. Everyone is swimming in debt, or most people,
right.
Are just swimming in debt. And like, debt freaks me out. I don't know what it is, but it scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I paid off my student debt as quickly as I could, and I sacrificed to do so because I hate that hanging around your neck. And it seems like, particularly in North America, like just everyone just, swimming in debt.
It's the difference between accumulating objects and accumulating experiences.
Right.
So, I mean, when you don't own a bunch of stuff and you're deciding to spend your money moving around or whatever, you're accumulating tons of different experiences.
Yeah.
When you're in the trap of debt and it's a lot of objects, then you have to go into a work to a job. You have to behave a certain way, and that is such a routine behavior that
So normalized.
It's very
like everyone is doing it.
Yeah, and that routine. When you're in a routine, you can't. Time speeds up.
Yeah.
The reason why when you walk someplace or you drive someplace and you're not sure where you're going, why it seems like it's taking forever is because it's a new experience.
Yeah.
Whereas on the way back, it seems like it's way shorter. It's because you already know how long it really is going to take. And so your brain becomes distracted. You start thinking of other stuff. You're not really there anymore. And so it goes by really fast.
I always think of, you mentioned that you had an old music reference. I'm obsessed with old music. There's this Bob Seger lyric where he says, 20 years, man, where'd they go? 20 years, man, I don't know. I think about that lyric all the time, just like how fast it can just all,
right.
I even just in my own life, the past 10 years, it's insane to me,
So yeah, I'd say like actually to put a headline on it, what's different about living this way that I'm living now versus before? My days are way longer.
Yes.
My time is way slower.
Yeah.
I'm not in that routine washing machine to where time speeds by and 20 years go by. Mm-hmm. I don't know what next week, I don't even know what a couple days from now really looks like. Yeah. Nothing's on my calendar. So, I mean, back to the entitled thing, though, I mean, some people may be listening to this and going, well, that's because you can do that.
Yeah. These conversations always risk sounding like two condescending assholes, like, oh, we've got it all figured out and our lives are perfect. Those suckers back home, like, no, not at all.
Right.
Your shit follows you around, again, like we were talking about at the beginning of this interview. Yeah, like, it never ends.
It doesn't.
We've all got our shit. We've all got our struggles.
I'm still duking it out to figure out like money and this and that and all these different things. I'm just doing it not in an office. And so I've made the decisions to not go into an office, and I have accumulated enough skills to where I can provide those skills wherever I am. And I still do work and I still do all of that stuff, and I'm doing it wherever I am. So I mean, I think if you want your life to last longer and you can't make these decisions, then start doing things, drive home a different way, go to eat at a different place, have a different conversation with your spouse, change up your office, like have an agreement that you're going to move to work from a coffee house that day, or, I mean, that's how you slow things down a little bit.
That's one thing I like. When the more you change things up and get out of your routine, like you're right, the day becomes longer. I was just having this conversation yesterday. My lady friend's off to a meditation retreat. It's the Vipassana thing, the 10 days. So you're basically living like a monk. No reading, no writing, no internet, no cell phone, nothing. You're meditating for, I think it's around 10 and a half or 11 hours a day. And one of the things I told her is like, you have no idea how long a day is until you're doing nothing. But a day feels like 10 years when you're doing that. It's so long, and for you and I, today will fly by because, we're out doing things and we're distracted and stuff. But, if you get out of your routine and you really do something different, it's astonishing how long a day is, how long a week can be.
Well, back to being born into operating systems that aren't your own. I mean, what a day looks like is prescribed very early in different cultures. But I mean, in westernized cultures, like, even down to the calendaring software, all your chats are 1 hour. You're going to have 3 meals. Your day starts around this time and ends around this time. Think of how many things are already programmed into what a day is supposed to look like. And then you just fall into that, and you're like, yeah, you're right. Like once I factor all those things in, and I've got kids, and I've got a relationship. I have no time. It's already gone, and then that week and that month and that year and that decade is gone.
Yeah. 20 years.
20
Where'd they
years.
go?
Yeah.
Coming back to something we were talking about earlier, long distance.
Yeah.
How the hell do you do it, man? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, a friend. So,
like, how do you stay connected? How do you, I mean, even just speaking personally, like, how do you do it?
well, the first thing I think that I've learned is I mean, and this is a book everyone knows, and it's just a good common vocabulary book, and there's a lot of truth to it, which is that whole love languages book. So I think
Gary Chapman?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Gary
the 5
Chapman.
love languages. See, just pausing you for 1 minute, I've taken the test and everything, and I score like abnormally high on physical touch, right? So like actually being, physically intimate with the person, not just sex, just physical intimacy. That's like my number one by a country mile. I don't know where you stand, but so for me, it's even more difficult in some ways to stay connected, to stay feeling good. But how do you?
Yeah.
I cut you off. Go on.
No, I was going to say that, build on what you just said, which is that I think if that is your primary love language, a long distance relationship that's when it's the hardest, because you can't solve for that.
Technology is not caught up to
Right.
to that extent.
Yeah. So for me, mine is a tie between physical touch and quality time. For me, the way that we solve that is through we use WhatsApp's voice messaging, where you can just record a message and then send it to somebody, and we do that instead of texting. Because we ran into lots of problems when we were texting each other, because we had all that time being apart. Before we used WhatsApp, we would text each other. And as you know, the difference between I love you and I love you and I love you.
And I love you?
Yeah, I love you all has very different meanings, and there's no way to hear that, or the gentleness of it, or any of it in a sentence that you read on your phone. So we switched over, and that would cause a lot of problems in a long distance. I mean, it'd be kind of like a quick update. The person was busy, and then the person's feelings would get hurt, or they'd feel disconnected. Yeah. So we switched over to doing vibrational communication through voice, and that's why people who are listening to this podcast it's better than reading this. You want to hear the richness and intonation and melody.
So much more intimate.
Right.
Yeah, like it's not even comparable.
Exactly. So that really changed the game for us in terms of long distance relationships, and we do that daily when we're not together. And so that keeps us connected. The physical part, I mean, there's just no way, there's no shortcut, as we talked about. And then, and then I guess the rest of it has to do with like how you structure things. I mean, for me, I have made no bones about the fact that I don't believe one person can give me everything. And I have different friends who give me different things. And so I feel kind of like loved by being with, and again, it's obviously not a sexual thing, but it's like I feel kind of satisfied. My loneliness is satisfied when I'm sitting down and having a really long conversation with somebody, because that works for me. And so oftentimes what I'll do is, whether it's a guy or a girl or a woman or a man, I will try to, I'll sit down and have a really, really cool, intense conversation. And then I don't feel as lonely anymore when April's not around. Sure. So that works for me too. So those are the kinds of things that we do. And then some of the other things I mentioned before, we do check-ins. Is this working for us? Is this not? Can we do a quick trip to see each other? To satisfy the physical aspects of things. Yeah.
I really like the idea about the voice messages. And I've just thinking back times when I've done that, it does make a big difference. It's a lot, you feel a lot more connected actually. Yeah. I think I'm going to implement that. I like that idea a lot. parenthood.
Yeah.
You have a delightful 4-year-old
I do.
named Gray,
Yes.
who is a lot of fun, and very good natured, it seems. I mean, yeah, like super cool little kid. Loves Lego. We have
love Lego.
We have that in common. But what the hell is it like traveling with a 4-year-old? Because, I was thinking about this the other day too. Like in 2019, can you imagine travel 50 years ago? Like world travel like this? Like it must have been just orders of magnitude more difficult. I can't imagine without the internet, without all this connectivity, I really can't imagine. And travel, but even in 2019, travel is still a massive pain in the ass sometimes, right? Like you're, facing that a little bit, planning this Japan trip. I've been on miserable car rides across beautiful Lao countrysides with, someone blasting terrible Lao pop music for 9 hours, and overnight buses in India that took a day with Bollywood blaring in my ear. You're on this cliffside looking to your imminent death.
Yeah.
Especially in this part of the world, travel is still very difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, difficult is relative. I wouldn't, talk about white people problems. that's one of them, But it's still a real, it's not easy sometimes. You get worn down, and it's a lot of work sometimes. Often more work than you planned for. But I can't imagine doing that with a 4-year-old. Like, what's that like? How do you do that?
Well, you have to pick. You have to make certain sacrifices when you have kids, and one of them for us anyway is, for example, when we were in Bali, we were in Bali for a couple months, and everyone there, it's a scooter culture. There's really, there's cars, but everyone's on a scooter. And when we got there, we were like, okay, are we going to put Gray on a scooter? He's 4. Like, I've never driven a scooter. I'm not comfortable on a scooter. April doesn't know how to drive a scooter. The rest of the scooter traffic there's no rules. So, there's no traffic lights. There's no lanes. There's general concept of how things are just supposed to naturally flow. And people get hurt on scooters all the time. And so, so we had that to face. We had the fact that he got motion sickness really easily to face. We had, that getting around is logistically harder with bags and things and, dietary things and all that other stuff. If you have a 4-year-old and all of a sudden you're thrust into a different diet, they're kind of picky at that age. Some of them, some kids are. So we end up just kind of going, all right, well, that means we're not going to do a scooter. We're going to rent a car, or we're going to have like an Uber-y kind of a thing everywhere, which means it's going to take longer. We're going to make him try new food, and if he's hungry, he'll eat, and see how that works. We're going to realize that there's certain things that we might want to do that would be like fun for us, the two of us, but not so much great for a 4-year-old. If we wanted to go whitewater rafting, or if we wanted to go, trekking up and hiking for a couple hours or something like that. Like, there's a lot of stuff that having a kid just naturally takes you out of the running to do. And that's, I think, whether you're traveling or not, once you have a kid, you just go, well, I'm not going to be staying up late watching Netflix anymore because I have to have sleep, because otherwise I'll go crazy, and I have a kid who's going to wake up in the middle of the night, so I'm not doing that anymore. So there's just I think you get into a natural rhythm of going, life is different now for a period of time. It's not forever, especially when they're really young, where you just let go of a lot of your own stuff and you start going, okay, now I have to kind of put it within this framework. So that's what we would do. When we're traveling around, even when we lived in Mill Valley in California, which is just north of San Francisco, and there's really windy roads out to Stinson Beach, and we would go, well, we're not going to Stinson Beach because he's going to get car sick. Or April steals all the puke bags on planes and keeps them with her so that if we land someplace and we don't know the roads and he's going to get car sick, she's got a bag there and she's prepared in case he gets sick from some driver in, Hoi An, Vietnam, who's going through the mountains to get to some other place. So we try to make decisions where we're taking away the option, things we know that are going to be a challenge, and then just kind of try to be prepared in the meantime, I guess.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I guess related question, something I was wondering about is, so you said you have two older boys from your first marriage, and then you have Gray, who's 4, right?
Yep.
Like that must be like, it's a really interesting opportunity. And I imagine it's one that's not afforded to a lot of people, where there's such a big gap between kids. Mm-hmm. And it's like not like you get another shot at it, because, it's not like you're done parenting your first 2 sons. But in a way, it kind of is that way, in a certain sense. Yeah. Like, so I guess I'm really curious about, and this is probably an enormous question, but like what you learned about parenting the first time around. And more specifically, like, what are you doing differently with Gray, perhaps, that you didn't do the first time?
Well, yeah. The first time I was, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I was focused on checking the boxes of things. And so I was very focused on my career. I was very focused on everything except parenting. So I was not very present. I was unhappy in most of the vectors of my life. I didn't really love my marriage. I didn't really love my job. I didn't really love myself. I didn't really love a lot of those things. And I was acquiring a lot of material things. And so so all of those things means I was a certain kind of, and I was in my, I was your age, actually. I was early 30s. So I really, I had my first kid when I was 28 and then 30. So I really didn't know a lot about what was important to me. So I wasn't really present in the same way. So yes, it is an opportunity to be different in those parts of your life. I did the best I could, just like everybody's parents for the most part. But it wasn't like we were talking about before when we were talking about motorcycles. You just make a lot of mistakes, and then you just kind of figure out what is going to work. And so you make mistakes with the first kid. You're a little bit better with the second kid. If you keep having kids, you get better and better and better at parenting. In my case, there's this huge gap. And frankly, I didn't want to have more kids. When I got married, the agreement was to not have more kids. And it became a real... probably the hardest part, one of the hardest moments of my life was like, what am I going to do here? Because I had 3 choices: have kids and potentially be resentful about how it affected my life, don't have kids and then have a wife who's very resentful for not having the opportunity to have family of her own, biologically. Although she raised a lot of Daniel and Mason when they were my older 2 when they were growing up. Also, but just it's different. So resentment there, or like leave the relationship. Those were kind of the options. So I kind of went into it kicking and screaming, actually, and it was a very and I did have a lot of resentment in the beginning when I had Gray, because I felt like, shit, man, I'm back starting. It's like going all the way through school and getting to college and graduating college to go out into the world and then going, wait, go back to kindergarten again. And that's what it felt like. Yeah. And so it was an existential crisis for me. And but then I think since then, because I had those hard relationships with April, because I said I want to restructure, I want to just do things super, super, super differently this time, and that was working because I was a different person, and I'm now like raising Gray with a lot of different value sets than I had the first time. It is a fundamentally different experience. I'm way more chill. I really, because my days are longer and I'm focused in different ways, I'm actually present with Gray. April was just in Morocco for a couple of weeks, and I just spent a couple of weeks with Gray, and it was just the 2 of us. And like, honestly, I would go to bed at the end of the day just thanking the universe for the day and the fact I had that opportunity. Everything's quieted down, and we're just like actually present with each other. I'm not distracted by anything else. And so I'm enjoying it almost, maybe the way grandparents, and I'm a way older dad this time too, so almost like the way a grandparent would enjoy their grandkid, because they're old enough to know that, Jesus, there's not much more important than this. And so I have a serious appreciation for Gray and for being a dad again. Yeah.
So it seems like one of the main things you're doing differently is how you approach education with your kids. You mentioned unschooling earlier. We've talked a little bit about that, but what is unschooling?
Yeah. Unschooling is pretty radical. So it's within the category of homeschooling, but it's not actually homeschooling. So there's schooling, which is an education system, which in my opinion, having been through that education system, is a little bit like a Play-Doh template, right? Where we get squeezed into, this is what all of this stuff looks like. This is what you're supposed to learn. This is how to answer questions.
It served the Industrial Revolution very well. Very well, but in the 21st century, it's pretty antiquated in some ways.
It runs the operating system for the most part.
Yeah.
So we all get through that with a bunch of false promises of like, we're going to get a great job, and we're going to like, there's a lot of mythology around it. And it teaches you to be a great follower, to make that system run. But I found it to be, this is a great book, by the way, that is related, that people should read, called Different by Young Mi Moon, who's a professor at Harvard, who talks about it's really about kind of differentiation in the business world. But one of the things she talks about in that book is how teachers would often get very disheartened by taking these kids who are filled with this incredible energy and imagination and passion, and to learn and to be themselves and to express themselves, and then have to push them through the standardization machine. And how, they read these papers from kids, and, everyone ends up sounding, it's the same paper from all these kids, because everything's so standardized, and how hard that is for teachers too. And one teacher in there decided to get rid of that and just give kids this open-ended, like, do a project, and it had no structure to it. And how interesting of an experiment that was, where some kids, obviously, there was an absolute failure. They had a hard time with it, blah, blah, blah. That's a whole other conversation about maybe why. But other kids came in with the most creative, passionate, interesting kind of work. Anyway, so if you believe that the education system has those problems, then there are other options. One is, yes, you can homeschool. So homeschooling, what's the difference between homeschooling and education system? Actually, nothing, other than you're not going into a brick and mortar place to do it. So what happens is you still have lesson plans, it's still standardized tests and courses and all that stuff. Unschooling is the absence of standardized curricula. And instead, it's replaced with a attention on topics between you and your kid. So, for example, if your kid gets super into skateboarding, you could look things up on Google, talk about the science of it, show them stuff on it, draw pictures of it, sign them up with a person that's a former professional skateboard person who teaches
like
classes.
Geometry lessons in there.
Yeah. And then you just kind of go on that for a while and kind of research it. That's what Gray always said. Can we research that? He always wants to research things. That's what he thinks of this. He's 4.5, so he actually would not really, he'd be starting school this coming fall. But so far we've already started this with him, and so we always do these research projects, which are like, walk through the backyard, pick up things he's interested in, and then go look it up.
Pretty cool that a 4-year-old is so dedicated to research.
Yeah, he's super into it, and it's cool. Because I think people naturally have curiosity. Sure. We're curious about the world around us. So this is about taking his curiosity. I can already hear all because I've done so much work into this myself. I know what all the follow-up questions around that. So what about this? What about that? But it's taking things people are naturally curious about, and then building around the natural curiosities people have, with as much outside help and self-directed help as possible, so that they follow their own interests. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are, then there's things like, well, what about math and reading and blah, blah, and all the stuff that people have to learn? And what about socialization and all that stuff? So let me talk about
this. This is a really easy interview. I can just...
Yeah. You don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Socialization. So
That's the one for me. Like when you were first talking to me about this, like I'm totally on board with everything else, but I just, I think, that is so crucial for kids. So I think we've talked a little bit about this, but how do you approach that with Gray?
Well, first let's talk about what socialization actually is in schools. And then we'll talk about what socialization is in unschooling. So socialization in schools, we've all been to school. So what was it? We were put into a room with a bunch of people we didn't choose and had to sit in rows and shut up. Yeah. And then we got to socialize when we would go out to recess or in before or after, right? And there's plenty of other kids around or at lunch. And that was socialization in schools. Socialization for Gray, I mean, you've met him. He's extremely social.
Yes.
So he
and not shy, because my experience of kids that age is they take a while to warm up to you, and Gray just can't wait to invite me over to his house.
He wants to sit next to you. He wants to tell you
extremely
things.
Social, yeah.
So how does he spend his days? Well, he spends his days, first of all, moving around into all these different locations that we're moving around to in days that are not the same every single day. He's out, because we don't sit inside all day long, we're actually moving around. He's faced with socializing with tons of different people all day long. That's why he has no fear of talking to adults. Mm-hmm. He talks to adults all the time, and he finds kids all the time, too. Like a couple days ago, we were down here in One Neiman, and there's an open area, and they were playing live music, and he found a bunch of kids and was jumping in and playing with them. And April signs him up for some art classes and for some skateboard. The skateboarding thing is really one of his interests, and so he's around plenty of kids and plays after school in quotes with lots and lots of kids all the time. And so he's socializing both with adults and kids, and he's not missing anything right now at 4.5 where socialization is an issue for him. He's thrust into the world. The thing about our approach to unschooling is that he has a voice in this. It's not something we're going to force him through. So at some point, and we know other unschooling parents, at some point some kids go, I feel like I'm missing out on being in school because everybody else is in school. And if he feels like he wants to go do that, we're going to let him do that because he wants to do it. And some kids continue that way, and they just elect themselves into it from an unschooling perspective. And some kids try it and go, wow, this is everything you said it is, or everything that I feel like it is, which is like not for me. I'd rather go back to doing things the way it was before. And we know families, in fact, our doula who helped deliver Gray has, I think, like an 18-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 11-year-old, all of which have never been to school before. And they're going on, I mean, the 18-year-old's going on to a fantastic school who looked at that whole opportunity, the whole kind of upbringing as like an amazing differentiator, and what an amazing education, being able to move around and have this kind of a quote-unquote education, just learning this way. So, I mean, it's a different way to bring up your kids, and it doesn't follow the system. And much like love and healthcare and education and entertainment and spirituality, all these things that are not part of the system automatically get kind of pooped on by people who don't want to sacrifice their own identity as upholding that system. So they're going to poop on that idea. And there's other people who maybe don't find their identity in those systems, and they go like, wow, that's really cool. Or it's not for me, but I appreciate it. And so we're just going to test it. We can't break him. He's not going to miss out on anything in life. He's had already a fundamentally different experience in life than the first two kids that we had and that we're raising. And frankly, their feedback has been like, oh my God, this is super cool that you're doing this. Like, and they're still in systems. They're in college. And they're like, well, it's so cool, so cool that you're doing it. And it's not for everybody.
Yeah. That's very cool. Just kind of putting a bow tie or putting a bow in this conversation. Is that the expression, putting a bow on this? I don't know.
Yeah, put a bow on it.
Yeah.
Put a bird on it.
I'm always like to ask people like you, what are you, well, are you finding what you're looking for when you set out on this particular journey, leaving the States and stuff. And what are you most excited by or inspired by right now?
So once I shortened my horizon to maybe a month or less, I am finding what I'm looking for. I think it's when I put the horizon out on like impossibly huge, like less sprints and more like marathon-oriented topics. That's where I would always get frustrated. But I shortened my time frame. Like, hey, I'm just going to do this for a month, And so then it gets a lot more satisfying because you're like, well, that didn't work, or here's what I learned, or that worked out great. So I am finding what I'm looking for once I shortened my horizon.
And the decisions are a lot less risk that way.
Right. Yeah. It feels, when you look backwards, you go like, wow, I did a whole lot. That was really cool. But you're just biting off a lot less. And just, thin slices instead of the entire thing. So yes, I'm finding what I'm looking for because my looking for is short range. And what was the second question?
What are you most excited about? Or inspired by right now? Just in general in your life.
Yeah, I guess frankly, the thing I'm most excited about is I'm proud. In the past, I've rearranged furniture and thought that was change. So I would feel like, oh, I'm unhappy. So
time for a new futon.
New this, new that. And I would rush to those answers because it's so scary. Your brain wants an answer. It does not want the unknown.
Yeah.
So what I'm most excited about is that I've entered into a almost 5 month at this point period, and so far it looks like it'll be considerably longer than that, where I've gotten somewhat comfortable, a lot more comfortable with not putting a cherry on everything and being in a space where I can listen and not have answers, and I'm not looking out the same window every single day, physically and mentally. I'm looking out at things differently every single day, and I'm not rushing to complete anything. I'm most excited about that because I want to see where that leads. And I know it's not a forever place for me. I will end up becoming some version of a more stationary reality, but it will only be after I've had an opportunity to let the endings end that I really want to end and be in a space of neutrality for long enough to where the things that I begin, I've chosen, back to the Voltairean analogy of putting those things in my garden on purpose.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I really like the way you wrap that up. So the last thing I'll ask you, I like to do this corny exercise, but I think it's fun. I'm always curious what people say. I'm going to ask you to complete these sentences with the first things that come to mind.
Okay, pork. All right, sorry.
Lunch, don't worry. Lunch is coming.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we can get pork too. I know it's fun. Let me see if I knew them from memory. Right. The trait I am most attracted to in the opposite sex is?
Risk.
Risk. Interesting. Can you just talk about that a little bit? I have to pause. Why risk?
If someone, because that generally signals somebody who is willing to go against. Yeah, exactly. And so they're going to be deviators because they deviate from norms, social norms or cultural, whatever the cultural norms are, beliefs or whatever. So they're going to risk something. And if you're willing to risk something, to me, that shows a level of confidence and courage and passion that is very attractive to me. So whenever I find, especially, I'm heterosexual, so I'm attracted.
How dare you?
I know. I'm cisgendered and heterosexual. So I love women. That's what I'm attracted to is women.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, I do. And I love women who risk stepping out of what a woman is supposed to be based on other people's definitions of what a woman is supposed to be. And that can be anything. It can be a woman who is like super career minded and very successful, and that's not okay in some cultures. It can be women who celebrate their sexuality in a way that is not okay in some cultures. It can be women who have drastically different perspectives on child rearing or whatever it is, or just opinions on things that are not okay, especially for women to have. That is very attractive to me. I might not agree with them, but I at least I'm definitely likely to not be sexually attracted to them, but I am attracted to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the thing that I really admire in people, male or female, is just people who are very true to themselves. Mm-hmm. You know, whether that's like a stay-at-home mom who really loves being a stay-at-home mom and she's all in and she's doing it not because society or her husband or anything. It's like, that's what she wants. That's, you know, I find that, attractive in friends, attractive. Mm-hmm. It's like the thing we were talking about earlier about, I don't care what someone's passionate about, but like, as long as they're passionate about something, I'm really drawn to people like that. Even if it's something I have no interest in, I know nothing about, the fact that they're really into something, I always gravitate to people like that. Okay. So 2 more sentences. I would most like to be remembered as,
I think the answer to that is, someone who changed themselves.
Love is
tough.
That's great. Absolutely. Amen. Well, this was a blast. Thanks a lot for this, Sam.
Zach, I appreciate you inviting me to do this. It's been a lot of fun.
Great. That's great. I love the note we closed on. That's perfect. There you have it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed another conversation with Sam Lawrence. If you'd like to learn more about Sam and connect with him, reach out. Please go to humansinlove.com, where you'll find show notes, links to everything we talked about. And you'll also find a link which will tell you how to leave a rating and review on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. I'll remind you one more time that if you dig the show, please take a minute to go to iTunes or your podcast app of choice, leave a rating and a review. That's all for now. I'll talk to you again very soon. I'm going to go find a nice glass of wine and a place to warm up. Thanks for listening as always. And until next time, remember that life is short, far too short to not wear a heavy sweater when you're in Canada. Thanks for listening, friends. I'll talk to you again soon.